So that was the moment, like I vividly remember this conversation with her and the moment where I was like pipetting under the hood, just thinking about this. And then I'm like, well, this is crazy, and this is what I feel like I need to do with my life. Like if this
like
is
a moment.
Yeah, it really was. Like it just kind of hit me like, yeah, I need to be able to help make these decisions because this is so important.
Kia ora everyone, and welcome to LabMates Beyond the Bench. This is a podcast sharing the stories of how scientists and their research moved beyond the lab bench and into the real world. Today I'm joined by Dr. Kathleen Lucere. Welcome, Kathleen. And could you please tell us a little bit about your academic career and what you studied?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Maddie. This is one of my favorite things to talk about. So I did my bachelor's in biology at the University of Albany in New York. I'm from New York. And I also did a minor in business and a minor in neuroscience. And then I took not a very long break, but a break. And a few years later, I did my PhD in biochemistry down in Otago.
Awesome. Did you say you did an honors, or do you go straight from bachelor's to PhD?
Yeah, I went straight from bachelor's to PhD. The reason why I was able to do that in New Zealand, which it's normal to do that in the States, is because my bachelor's was a 4-year degree, and in my last year I did an independent research thesis that is kind of the equivalent of an honors degree here in New Zealand. The head of the department read that thesis and accepted me into my PhD.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. I have come across people who have done similar things, but it's not super common if you're in a New Zealand university to hear of the kind of how things might work outside. So that makes sense. I think our honors year is quite a very short and sharp experience here, and but it is separate from our bachelor's, so that is quite interesting. And in between your bachelor's and your PhD, what kind of work were you doing during that time? Was it related to science?
Yeah, so when I was in my bachelor's, I thought I wanted to go to medical school. So I did all my studies in pre-med, aiming to go to med school. And then when I left uni, I took the MCAT twice, which I would not recommend. And I did everything that I thought I needed to do to get into medical school. So I worked for a doctor's office. I worked in urology. I worked as an EMT. So I was on an ambulance for probably about a year, maybe just over a year. And then I went and did research at Cold Spring Harbor Lab. So I was at Cold Spring Harbor for, I think, about 2.5 years. I was in a lab run by Dr. Zader, and we did neuroscience, more specifically mapping the connectome and projectome of neurons. So those were the projects that I worked on for, a little while.
And then did you get swayed into research, or was it that the medical door wasn't opening the way you predicted? Was it a bit like that? I mean, that happened to me too.
Really? That's so funny. Yeah, so the med school wasn't happening. And I spent 3 years working and studying for the MCAT and applying to med school. So that's 3 cycles of applications. And I was waitlisted, I was interviewed, but ultimately it just didn't happen. And during this time, this is a little side story, but I was a competitive weightlifter.
And my goodness.
I was training a lot, like 3 hours a night, 5 to 6 days a week. And I met this woman who was also training with me in the gym, and we became friends. And then it turns out there was a whole bunch of Cold Spring Harbor scientists training in this gym. And
really?
Yeah.
Like a little community.
It was a CrossFit gym, and it was like the CrossFit gym for the Cold Spring Harbor scientists. So I became friends with these scientists, and I obviously had an interest in science. I studied science. I thought I was going to medical school at this time, and then it wasn't happening, and then they turned into mentors, and they would help me with, what I was focusing on and the type of
Yeah.
work I was doing. They were the reason why I got into Cold Spring Harbor Lab, through their connections. And then, yeah, so this one woman said, "Hey, why don't you come with me to New Zealand and do your PhD if med school doesn't work?" And I said, "Okay." And her name was Sarah Dearmeyer. So
Oh,
I
awesome.
yeah, so Sarah Dearmeyer is the reason why I moved to New Zealand, and she's the reason why I did a PhD.
That is the coolest story. Like, I've heard of, for some reason, a lot of the labs that I've ended up being in or adjacent labs are rock climbers. Like, I feel like it's like there's like something that draws people to climb rocks for their, I don't know, science research groups. And now you're the second podcast guest to go, and I did weightlifting. Is there like a little other side subset that do weightlifting or spend time in the gym? I can't believe
Yeah.
that was your gateway to doing a PhD in New Zealand. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, it is really funny. It is honestly just how my whole life has gone. Like, I just always worked really hard and followed my passions, and it just brought me places that I never thought would happen.
That
I
is so
never
crazy.
never had my sights set on any of these things, never thought I would do a PhD. Always thought I would go to medical school, but I always really highly regarded, upper education, and I
Hmm.
always thought I would get a doctorate degree. I thought it would be a medical doctor degree, but so I just kind of followed the next best opportunity that was put in my way.
When did the dream of being a medical doctor stop, right? So you've done a PhD now, but you didn't go back and decide to do medicine or, take on that path after your PhD. So at what point did you realize that that wasn't on the cards for you at all?
Yeah. To be completely honest, I think that I was always unsure if I wanted to be a doctor. I think that I had a lot of friends who ended up going to med school. A great group of my friends in college
Hmm.
all were pre-med, and it was the similar type of study that we all really enjoyed. And so I think that there was a lot of factors at play that made me think that this was what I needed to do. I think it was more of a I need to do this rather
Hmm.
than this is what my desire is. And I think that a lot of people don't really understand how many options are out there in the world for different career paths. And yeah, I really think that I deep down believe that I always was unsure if I really wanted to go to med school. Because I have friends now who are medical doctors in the States.
Hmm.
And I look at them and they work harder than anyone I've ever met. And I know a lot of people in different industries that work hard, but they live and breathe
Yeah.
medicine, right? And I just never really had that.
Yeah. No, fair enough. And with your PhD project, what was your research topic? Was it something you chose, or was it, something that kind of chose you again?
Yeah, it was something that chose me. So Sarah Dearmeyer at Cold Spring Harbor Lab. So when I met her when we were both weightlifting together, she was in her postdoc and she did her postdoc with David Spector and they were studying long non-coding RNAs. And so she came to Otago and opened her lab studying long non-coding RNAs in cancer. So
Hmm.
Cold Spring Harbor, she was also studying cancer and brought that here. So when I was in initial discussions with her about me coming and joining her lab, I really needed it to be in something that I was interested in. And then when she described to me what the work was that she was doing in detail,
Hmm.
I was like, this is exactly what I would want to do. If I didn't go to med school, I would love to study something that's clinically translatable.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to ask about that. It sounds like not the next best thing, but something that's just as real world relevant would be to do something that was going to translate into a real cure. So, how long had she been in New Zealand before you followed afterwards? Was it? Pretty
I think
quick?
she was yeah, I think she was only here a year, and
Cool.
then I'm pretty sure she came here in 2018, and then I came in 2019.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. And was that your first snippet into startup life? Because I know she sort of took some of that and there was a spin out of the university. So was she already in the middle of that when you came over, or was that something that you got to see evolve from a research project and then into something more? Did that
Yeah.
trigger your excitement for the land of startups that kind of, I guess, led to where you are now?
Yeah, definitely. So I feel like this was probably always in her head. This woman is just incredible and always has ideas. So I don't know at what stage of the incubation it was in her head, but from my experience, she officially began the spin out of Amrock Therapeutics, I believe in my second year.
Hmm.
And that's when I was told basically that my PhD is intellectual property for what will become a cancer drug development company. Yeah, so that is, yes, how I got into startups. So I think one of the things that really hit me hard at this time was she was talking about, oh, we're gonna start a company and this is what the basis of the company will be my PhD and some of the other PhDs in the lab.
Hmm.
And we're going to follow, specific assets that are being developed. And these venture capitalists are going to come in, and these venture capitalists are bringing money, right?
Yeah.
And I've never heard about anything like this. Like I grew up with like a business mind. Both my
Mm.
parents were entrepreneurs in ways, not the tradition, not the startup entrepreneur, but my mom was a lawyer and she ran her own firm, and my dad was an aquarium he was an aquarium maintenance like guy.
Yeah.
So he would set up aquariums like in doctors' offices and dentist offices.
Awesome. Very niche.
We yeah, we had like in my basement growing up, there was like all of these tropical fish. Like it was literally an
That is
aquarium
quite cool.
yeah, it was really cool. Anyway, so I understood the idea of investment and I understood business
Yeah.
to a degree, but when Sarah started talking about these venture capitalists, I was like, well, how like the thoughts started running in my head of how do these drugs that I'm working on, how do they get into the patient? Because I don't know. As an academic, like I
Yeah.
actually have no idea how this works. I know that they need to go through clinical trials. I know that that costs a ton of money
Hmm.
and that there's a lot of pieces to getting this drug into a patient. And I kind of was just asking Sarah Dearmar, like, where does this funding come from? And she was pretty much like, well, basically the two options are philanthropists
Hmm.
or
Yeah.
venture capitalists, like, because there is no other option. So that was the moment, like I vividly remember this conversation with her and the moment where I was like pipetting under the hood just thinking about this, and then I'm like, well, this is crazy and this is what I feel like I need to do with my life. Like if this
Like a
is a
moment.
huge yeah, it really was. Like, it just kinda hit me like, yeah, I need to be able to help make these decisions because this is so important. How is this money allocated? That is just a massive decision to be making.
In such a different way than the decision making behind a grant, for example, which is lesser money. The returns are not the same financial returns that are expected from a research grant, right? So, so you're mid pipette, and then you just go VC funding, future career.
Yeah, pretty much.
I'm going to help these people with this lots of money figure out how to invest in science backed companies. Is that yeah, you were like, I
Yeah.
want to know more about that.
Yeah. Yeah,
Wow.
that's pretty much exactly what happened, and so I said that to Sarah. I said, "How do I become one of these people?" And
Really?
Yeah, yeah, and she said, "I'll introduce you." So she introduced me to the VCs that invested into Amrock Therapeutics, and they're great people, and they, mentored me a bit, and I said, "How did you get here? How do I get your job?" And
It's
they said,
awesome.
"Well," yeah, that's very literally what happened, and then they said, "Well, why do you want my job?" And I was like, "Well, because it seems awesome, and I think that this is, like, the coolest thing ever." And they said, "Well, you first step is go join Momentum,
Mhm.
the Momentum program." And I said that's exactly what I did. So I went and I joined it, like, that week, and then I went to the first meeting and I started learning about what is investment? How do you listen to a pitch meeting? How do you ask questions? How are people thinking about this? So that was the very start of my startup into VC journey.
Wow, that's awesome. And do you think it was like a trigger that you never had for any other piece, even mid school, when you heard about like VC investment and being in that journey? Was the pull for that much stronger than anything you'd had in your career to date? Like,
It's so I've never ever thought about this. I've never thought about it this deeply. Like, that's a really deep question to ask. And I would say absolutely. I think
mm,
it was the strongest thing that I've ever said, yep, I want to do this. Yeah.
that's I think because so for me, I did a PhD and a postdoc, right? And then during my postdoc, I for a long time was like, I think I want to work in industry, or I know academia is not for me, but and that's all I could say is I think I might want to work in industry. And then what happened is I applied for a role in the tech transfer office. And up until that point, I didn't really know what a tech transfer office was.
Mm.
And I started learning about research commercialization. And it was like flipped. I was like, I'm obsessed. I wanted to listen to all the podcasts. I wanted to hear all about how things got translated from a research lab into the real world. And I'm still pretty obsessed with that exact piece of understanding how you take a project of what you do in the lab and make sure that it's got the right elements that can go out to the next stage and be, yeah, investable basically, but really passionate about why don't more people understand what it really takes to take some research and move it on. And yeah, so for me, that's what I felt like. I felt like when I found that moment, it was, this is what I want to do. And it sounds
Mm.
very similar for you that you were, yeah. And then the more you learned about VC funding, the more you wanted to dive into that world and learn more about the business aspects of it.
Yeah, definitely. It was very similar for me. It was this light bulb moment of these drugs will not get into patients unless there's significant amounts of very high risk funding behind them. Like that was like the number one and only thought in my head. And
I love that. And then how far through your PhD were you? Like, how much did you have to wrap up what you were doing and then move on? Did you have much time?
so I can talk about, yeah, end of PhD and then
Yeah.
into transitioning into my job. So I joined the Momentum program. I think I was in the 3rd year of my PhD, so I was nearing
Yeah.
the end, and I was at that point, everybody's starting to think about, "What are we gonna do? Where are we gonna go?" And so, yeah, it must have been maybe a year before I ended.
Mhm.
And then Amrock Therapeutics was officially turned into a startup company, had employees, and I was wrapping up writing. And I didn't do, I wasn't working while I was writing. And then I landed an internship with Mott2. So Mott2 is a deep tech science focused VC. And the internship with Mott2 came from the Momentum program. So they had the Momentum
Right.
internship.
Internship.
So
Awesome.
yeah, which was just so amazing and so perfect. It was such perfect timing for me. So I was so lucky to get that internship. And then in
Mhm.
parallel, part time, I also worked for Amrock Therapeutics. So I did
Wow.
both of those things. It was a lot. It was so much fun.
Yeah.
I did both of those things at the same time for 9 months.
Mhm.
And I just learned so much in that short time frame of how do you run a startup, and then also how do you invest into startups. So
Like
it
both
was a
sides
lot of
of the
fun.
coin. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, at the exact same time. But yeah, it was great. It was a really amazing opportunity. And then after those 9 months, I got my job with Even Capital, which
Awesome.
is a
So it's quite a
VC.
quick transition. Yeah.
Yep.
What do you think were I guess, the skills, the transferable skills that you learned during your PhD that helped you get into that space, other than, I guess, curiosity around what a different path would look like? But is it organizational skills, writing, presenting? Like, what do you think were the main ones that helped you transition that if someone was going to follow you like that, they would need to think about developing?
Yeah, so I think for me, I'll be completely honest, I think the stars were aligned for me.
Yeah.
And I think that I was in the right place at the right time with the PhD that I took on, and the
Hmm.
fact that it turned into foundational IP. My PhD is embargoed, so my PhD would have been a nightmare for someone who actually, well, not necessarily, but it would have been harder for someone who wanted to continue in academia.
True.
Right. So I think I was a perfect match for me because I knew I didn't want to continue in academia.
Yeah.
So the types of skills I think would you need that commercial mindset, and that's what I
Mm.
was told by the VCs that I started networking with initially was you need to have some commercial understanding in order to get a job in VC.
Yeah.
So, joining the Momentum program was a small part for me to be able to start to understand what that means. And then ultimately getting the internship with a VC was what really trained me up in
Yeah.
venture. And I learned about how to conduct commercial due diligence for investments, for example, specifically in deep tech with Mod2. Um,
Hmm.
but other skills, I think number one is storytelling. Like the number one skill I think every person ever needs to have is the ability to tell a story,
Yeah.
and like a convincing one.
Hmm.
And I think when you're in academia, or for me at least, it's really hard to convince yourself that you're telling a really valid story. Based on the data that you've analyzed and based
Yeah.
on the amount of, or maybe the quality of the replicates you've performed, whatever it might be, which
Yeah.
obviously at the end of the day, there are reasons why you do these things to counteract data that's not good.
Yeah.
But I think as PhD students, it is easy to convince yourself that, like, everything's crap and and that and that you're a lie and that everything's a lie. I think moving out of a PhD, and of course, once you finish your PhD, you look back and you say, "Oh, yeah, that's actually amazing," right? Like,
Hmm.
there's a lot of quality there and that I did a good job, but when you're going through it, it's hard to see that that's how it'll turn out, and I think that, yeah, being able to condense a big picture story into a
Mm.
really compelling story to tell is one of the most important things, specifically for startups and
Yeah.
likewise venture capital, right? Because VCs, we need to do the same thing. It's a relationship, so we need to be able to convey why we are the best people to be your investors when
Mm.
we're looking at investments. So I think storytelling is probably number one.
Yeah. I think that's a very interesting point because as a scientist, you're told to not overstate your results. And so you use a lot of very like mild language, if that makes sense, where you're, you know, it could represent this, or it could, you get very, yeah, low level. But when you're doing storytelling and you're trying to convince someone that your story is worth it, there's a lot of emotional language used. You're trying to convince someone that this is a big problem that you're solving and that, yeah, whatever you're doing for the startup or same, I guess, for the VC while you're investing, you're trying to convince someone that there's the emotion there, that this is a big problem that you're trying to solve and that you're the right person to do it. And it's just very different from an academic presentation when you're interpreting some results. So
Exactly.
I do get that. And I think it is something that you learn maybe as you progress into a more senior academic position, because you do a bit of that in grant writing. But quite often you're not actually trained to sort of be able to tell that story. So that can be the biggest challenge, even if you stay in academia, that you're kind of stuck and not able to tell a compelling story. So you're right. Any person ever, even if you do stay in that traditional path, should learn storytelling.
Yes. Yeah, 100%.
Absolutely. Did you have any mentors that helped you transition, or was it a mentor or like a group of people? How did you find people to support you in that transition?
From PhD into venture.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think I mean, Sarah Diermeyer was a mentor to me for so many years. She still is one of my
Hmm.
best mentors, and she was very much like, "I want you to do whatever you want to do, and I will help you get there."
Amazing.
And yeah, like the best. So whenever I'm unsure about anything, she is the first person that I message. But aside from her, so one of the people who helps me a lot was Elliot Dunn.
Mm.
He's with Brandon Capital. He
Yeah.
was the first person that I spoke to, about venture. He was the person that I got a cup of coffee with and said, "How do I get your job?"
Awesome.
Yeah, so he was the person who catalyzed me actually understanding what I had to do to get into it. And then from there, after I got the momentum internship with Mott2, then it
Hmm.
was it was the team at Mott2, Andrew and
Yeah.
Kitty. The two of them were mentors to me, and they still are. They're also like, yeah, those all those people are still people that I call up when I have,
Yeah. There's a
things
lot of
going on.
there are quite a few scientists to VC um people, I guess, that can kind of help you make that transition. So they've been on that journey. They understand the academic brain into more of a commercial mindset. That sounds like you had the right people to kind of cushion you through that experience, as well as, I guess, just your own plowing through and wanting to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I honestly never really considered myself a hardcore academic, and I
Mm.
think that it really wasn't a shocking transition to me because it was the thing that I just once I fell into it once I got started with Mott 2 and once I was deeper into Amrock, the
Mm-hmm.
startup, it was just like, this is what I want to do and this is what I love to do. So it wasn't this huge, crazy transition from two different worlds. It was more of like, I know how to analyze data from
Mm-hmm.
my PhD, so I can figure out how to analyze a company. So it didn't feel like I don't know. I've made it this far. If I'm faking it, I don't know.
No, I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you're right. And I think it's probably that you were just really into it and you always had that business training anyway. So it's not, yeah, if someone had only a science all the way through, maybe it would be a bit more shocking. Or if they had a very academic supervisor and PhD experience, then it probably would be quite a transition. But because you always had that more worldview going on in your career, it's probably a bit of that as well. So
Definitely. Yeah.
yeah, that makes sense. What do you think the biggest myth that people think about leaving academia that you would like to like unpick? Is there like a myth about what it's like to leave academia that you'd like to um
That if you leave academia, the whole world's gonna end. I
yeah.
think, to be fair, I didn't go very far in academia. I
Yeah.
didn't do a postdoc, so I think it's easy for me to say that. It's hard
Yeah.
for other people who are really ingrained in it and really deep into it. But even for those people, I mean, I've seen people who I worked with years ago go and do postdocs and be in different postdoc positions for a long time and then ultimately leave as well. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't, people do it, and there are opportunities out there. There are really amazing opportunities out there when you just kind of take off that academic hat. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that, from my opinion, for the betterment of the world, it would be good to have more of these researchers and scientists take off the academic hat and put on a different hat, because, like, with my experience of realizing that only venture capital will get these drugs into people, we need researchers to get those drugs into people. We need researchers with amazing ideas to come up with a new way to solve global problems. And the only way to do that is through commercialization.
Mm-hmm.
I hope the academics, I don't want the academics coming after me,
Yeah, with
but
like pitchforks.
I mean, they might. I highly respect academia, and I highly respect academics, and I'm not taking anything away from that. We need those types of people
Mm.
to start businesses and to go and work for those businesses and to contribute to the commercialization of these types of ideas. I'm convinced that the only way to make global change is through innovation that
Mm-hmm.
starts in a lab, for example,
Yeah.
so that's really what I'm passionate about.
That's very similar to me and my mission, with just not necessarily that there's two paths, that you become commercial, or you like commercialization, or you're academic. Like, I feel like there's definitely a transition or a whole spectrum of in between, where people can work with companies and still be academic, or spin out something and then continue back in a more academic path. Like, yeah, I really would like to debunk some of that, where it's maybe you can do both, or you can work with lots of different people. You can get funding from industry projects as well as grant and academic paths. Like, why do you have to sort of choose one or become one thing? So, yeah, very similar. I do think there's a lot of the world's problems that can be solved by getting more researchers to work together, and to also work with people outside of their academic bubbles. So,
Definitely. Yeah.
shared mission.
Me,
Please don't come after us.
yeah, me and Maddie take on the world of academia.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So just small dreams.
Yeah, not a big mission at all.
Not at all. Awesome. All right. I have one last question, which is, do you still consider yourself a scientist?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I always introduce myself as a scientist, which is kind of hilarious because I think there are some people who have completed PhDs who still struggle to call themselves scientists.
Yeah.
But I think that it is a part of a very long portion of my past.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I'm not actively doing science, it's a part of me.
Awesome. Very good answer. It's really quite fun to see how people respond to that one, because I think everyone's like feeling in a different place depending where they are in their journey. So cool. Thank you very much. And that's all we're going to talk about today. So thank you so much for joining me today, and for everyone who tuned in to have a listen. And yeah, thank you. As we wrap up this episode, we hope you found the insights and stories shared today both inspiring and thought-provoking. If you're eager to connect with like-minded individuals and collaborate on exciting projects, we invite you to join the free LabMates platform. It's a vibrant community where innovation meets collaboration, and your next big idea could be just a conversation away. Sign up today and start building your network.